All right. Well, hey, everybody. How are you doing? I'm going to let Allie do a little introduction here and then I'll pop in.
Perfect. So welcome everybody to another Michael's Community Classroom. For those of you who have not been here with us before, my name is Allie W. I'm from Yarn Inspirations. And if you have any questions throughout the class, I'll be trying to get to as many as I can in the chat, as well as relaying your questions over to Marley. So please feel free to ask any questions and I'll be helping out.
All right. Cool.
Perfect.
Thanks, Allie. Oh, well, hello, everybody. As Allie and Raina said, my name is Marley Bird. I am a crochet and knitting ambassador for Yarn Inspirations Yarn. So that means I am bi crafty. I'm able to knit and crochet. And in today's class, we're going to learn how to do both knit or crochet the freezer pop cozy. These are very simple stitches that we are going to use to create something utterly fantastic. It's a great use of your scrap yarn you might have lying around, or it's a really good excuse to go to the store and buy maybe some of those like really hyper bright colors that you typically wouldn't use, but they would be perfectly added to a frozen pop and be a nice little cozy. I know that when I was a little kid, holding those little pops, like you get your little fingers so cold. So a little cozy thing would just be a nice little addition. And the fact that we're making them with Red Heart Super Saver yarn makes them washable. So super easy to clean as you know, you slobber and goober all over them. Really ideal for the holiday season as we're coming up to July 4th. So this is a good little pick. So for today's class, you're going to need a couple things. If you want to learn to knit, you're going to need some size 8 knitting needles. And I just grabbed some straight needles here. If you want to use circular needles, if you're familiar with those, you absolutely could do that, but I'm using some straight needles. And then of course, you're going to need your Super Saver yarn. So I have a Super Saver yarn right here. I'm going to use some pink. I'm also going to use a really bright grass green color today. And then you will need a bent tip tapestry needle of some sort to weave together the pieces, okay? If you want to crochet, you need all those items except the knitting needles. You'll need a crochet hook in the size I, okay? A size I crochet hook, which I think is a 5.5 millimeter. It is, it's a 5.5 millimeter. So you'll need one of those. Pretty simple stuff. For the instructions today, there is a pattern, one for knit and one for crochet. I'm pretty sure yep, I see them right there in the chat. So you can find them in the chat, or I'm hopefully when this video is available on the Michael's YouTube channel or presented to you later on, you'll be able to find that pattern relatively easy. It's simply called the Freezer Pop Cozy to knit or to crochet. As we follow through the instructions, I'm going to go super slow with how to do the slip stitch, how to do the cast on for knitting, how to do the chain for crochet. And then as we go into knitting, I'm going to show you how to knit. As we go into crochet, I'll show you how to do what's called a single crochet. We'll work up 2 swatches and then we will whip stitch them together and have ourselves a little cozy. Because I'm trying to get through both crafts today, that means I won't be able to stop a whole lot and repeat things. But the good news is because the video is getting recorded, you can go back and rewatch later on. I mean, that's not an excuse saying I'm going to leave you in the dust. It's just saying, hey, I'm going to make sure that I'm moving along so that you get all the information you need. All right, hands up, everybody ready? I see all the hands up. That's great. All right, we're going to go down to my hands and get started here. I think we will begin with knitting to start. So I'm going to set those 2 things aside. And I have my knitting needles. Let's do this. Okay, I'm going to start as if you are a beginner knitter because typically that's who's making something like this. This is really great introductory piece for a beginner knitter. So we're going to do what's called a knitted cast on. It makes it very easy to cast on stitches onto our needle and it mimics the act of knitting. So it's easy to transition to knitting. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is place a slip knot directly onto our knitting needle. And for knitters or crocheters, this is how you make a slip knot. You're going to take the tail of your yarn and place it into the palm of your hand. Take your working yarn and wrap it around your forefinger and your middle finger. And when you come back up, cross over. Now rotate your hand. So now you're looking at the top of your hand and you see 2 loops on your finger. You're going to go underneath this front loop and grab that back loop and pull it off of your fingers. As you pull the tail and the working yarn, you'll see that that knot gets created, and we can pull the tail and the working yarn apart to tighten up that knot and place it directly onto our knitting needle. You see that? Okay, I'm going to show you one more time. You're going to take your tail and place that into the palm of your hand. I like to hold that in place with my thumb. Take your working yarn, wrap it around your forefinger, come down like the back side, come up the middle finger, come all the way up. Now cross it over. That crossover is important there, okay? Once you cross it over, keep it crossed and rotate your hand. So now the crossover yarn is right here. It's towards the back of your fingers. Okay, can you see I locked everything in place? Like over here, I still have a hold of this tail. Over here, I put the yarn underneath those two fingers, so just to hold them in place. Now I take my other hand, go underneath the front loop, grab the back loop, and then pull all of that off of my fingers. I'm still grasping my tail and my working yarn. So as I pull, it tightens up that knot. Now all I have to do is place that knot with a loop on my needle, take the tail and the working yarn, spread them apart, it tightens up the knot, and it places it directly onto our needle. Now, when you place it on your needle, you want to make sure that you're not making it so tight that it can't move. So make sure you can still move that needle, okay? And it'll make it super easy. Now we're going to take this needle and place it into your left hand. Whether you're right-handed or left-handed, this works for both. That's the beauty of knitting. When you put this into your left hand, you want to make sure that this slip knot is relatively close to this tip, but it is not down here on the tapered section, okay? We want to make sure it's here on the barrel of the needle, okay? The other thing I like to do is make sure I'm holding that slip knot so it doesn't go anywhere. I don't want it to fall off prematurely. I usually will pull my tail over to this side of my finger so that way I don't accidentally knit with it. And what's going to happen here is we're going to use the working yarn here, and we're going to use this needle to begin to create knit stitches and place them on our left hand needle. So I will grab the extra needle here and I'm going to place it into my right hand. And going into this slip knot right here, if I were to hold this like straight across and take this needle here from my right hand, I'm going to go from left to right. So I'm going to go into that loop from the left side through the stitch to the right side. And it appears like it's going, through the back. It's just that I'm just putting my needle through that loop. Okay, it looks like I have a T. I have my working yarn here. I'm going to take my working yarn and I'm going to go around the long way around my right hand needle. Okay, I don't want to shortcut it. I don't want to go up over top and down. Okay, I want to start from down, go up over top and back around. Okay, I want you guys to see that again. If my needle is pointing to 12 o'clock, I want to go underneath, come up and around. So it's like I'm going that way. I don't know how else to say it. I don't want to go like this. I don't want to go like I'm going from 12 o'clock this direction, which would be counterclockwise. See that? It's like I'm going counterclockwise. I want to go clockwise. It's like I'm going around and coming back down. When you wrap your needle, you want to grasp the yarn in such a way that you have some tension on it and grasp your right hand needle. Because our goal here is to get that yarn that we just wrapped around our right hand needle, and we're going to pull it through the loop on our left hand needle. So I'm going to go like this, and hopefully you can see. I'm essentially going to swing my right hand needle through, and what that does is it pulls that loop up. Once you get that loop up, you're going to extend. So you extend that loop. So this is the loop, I just extended it. And I take my left hand needle, I'm going to hold it like this. I'm going to go around and up. Okay, so I swivel around, so I'm underneath it, and I scoop it up and I place it onto my left hand needle, and then I repeat that. So we're gonna do that all again. All right, so that's one stitch. Don't worry if you feel like you're all thumbs, okay, you guys? That's perfectly natural. If you're a brand new knitter, this is something completely new. You have to train your body and your mind and your neurons to fire back and forth from your fingers to your eyes to your head. This is a tricky thing to do, okay? So give yourself a little bit of grace. We're going to take our right hand needle, going from left to right, going into the new stitch I just created, or the one you already have on there, whichever one, it's the same process. Going from the left side through that loop to the right side. Essentially, I'm just putting it through the loop, right through it, coming from the left. Now I'm going to take my working yarn, going around my needle just like so. I still have a hold of my yarn. I grasp my needle, my right hand needle. I'm going to pull that loop I just wrapped around this. I'm going to pull it through the stitch that's on my needle, extend that stitch, swivel your left hand needle and scoop it up. And now it's on your left hand, and you do it again. Insert, around, come out, extend, swivel, and scoop. Or as I like to say, in the front door, around the corner, out the window, extend, swivel, and scoop. In the front door, around the corner, out the window, extend, swivel, and scoop. In the front door, around the corner, out the window, extend, swivel, and scoop. In the front door, around the corner, out the window, extend, swivel, and scoop. Every time you do this, you're putting a new stitch onto your needles. That way you can work into it, okay? This is called casting on stitches. Now, this is not the only way to cast on stitches. There are many different ways to cast on stitches, but this is a very good way to teach beginners how to cast on, because we are doing all the steps of an actual knit stitch, with the exception of putting that stitch we're creating onto the needle instead of just letting it be a new stitch on our right hand needle, okay? So I'm in the front door, around the corner, out the window, extend, swivel, and scoop. This is a very tricky thing. I know I make it look easy. I know that, but you just have to remember that some practice and some time just doing this will help your brain be able to manage this with your fingers, and all of a sudden it will all come together pretty much like the Matrix. You know what I mean? Okay. So I don't know how many stitches I have on here, so I'm going to count. You count your slip knot as a stitch, okay? In knitting, your slip knot counts as a stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and I need 15 as the pattern says. So I can do one more. So that's 15 stitches. Notice I can still move them, and I'm using bamboo needles, so they do grab a little bit, which is really great for beginners so they don't fall off the needle prematurely. But those right there, those are 15 cast on stitches using what's called the knitted cast on, okay? Once you've done this, you're now ready to move to the knit stitch, which you guys, because we just did this, you're going to see how easy transitioning to the knit stitch really is, because you're going to hold the yarn exactly the same way. But here's the difference. We go into the front door the same way. We go around the corner the same way. We go out the window the same way. Only this time, we don't want to put this stitch back on that needle. We want this stitch that we came through, we want it to jump off the porch. So we push it off. and we get our needles just like so. So then we don't let this one fall off. You hang on to it. You go into the next one on your left-hand needle and you do the same thing. Come around the corner, out the window. I'm going to let that stitch jump off the porch. In the front door, around the corner, out the window, jump off the porch. In the front door, around the corner, out the window, jump off the porch. You'll notice that before I jump off the porch, I'm making sure that these stitches come back here to this part of my knitting needle. It just makes sure that the stitches I've created are not going to fall off, okay? And they aren't going to lose control. So I go in the front door, around the corner, out the window, and I shove my needle up, and then I jump off the porch. And then I go in the front door, around the corner, out the window, off the porch. In the front door, around the corner, out the window, off the porch. In the front door, around the corner, out the window, off the porch. You just do this all the way down. Once again, you guys, I get it that this might be tricky. Give yourself some patience. Know that this might take some practice, which makes this the perfect little practice because nobody is going to care exactly how wonky or how crazy your stitches look when they're using this cozy on their freezer pop. They just care about getting every last ounce of the juicy juice out of that freezer pop. Seriously, we don't want to stress about anything. This is purely for our practice. When you come to the end, all of a sudden your left-hand needle won't have any more stitches on it, and your right-hand needle now has all the stitches. So what I like to do is before I do anything is I straighten out my stitches. I make sure everything is nice and straight and flowing down from my needles. I don't want it to be flowing up like this, like I don't want it up. I want all of my stitches to be flowing down. Now I'm going to take this needle that has all the stitches in it or on it, place it into my left hand, and I'm going to knit again because now I have my spare needle, the one that has nothing on it, in my right hand, and I do this all again. So I go into this first stitch from left to right, go around the corner, out the window, off the porch, in, around, out, off, in, around, out, off. And I'm just going to keep doing this, guys. I'm going to make sure that we can just sit here and essentially just watch me knit these stitches. Do it on your side too. You might not get as far as I am, and that's totally okay. If you've gotten to this point, you guys, as far as you've cast on and you're knitting some stitches, that is amazing. And you could absolutely call yourself a knitter because you are knitting a fabric. Okay, it's a little bit tricky. It's something to give yourself some patience, and holding your yarn is something that you're gonna find a way that works for you. Oh, if your stitches fall off, just put them right back on, and you just keep it going. All right, I'm gonna get to the end of this row and turn and do another row, just nice and slow. I got to the end. I make sure all my stitches are nice and straight. That's where they look. Put that needle into my left hand and begin again. So I like to grasp my yarn. I wrap it around my finger a couple times. And here we go. Go from left to right, right into the stitch. Go around my right hand needle. So I'm not coming over top, going underneath and around. So like when I say over top, it's like I'm right here and I'm over top. I want to go underneath and then come up over top. Bring that yarn through that stitch and then let the stitch I went into jump off the porch. Okay. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. Allie, how we doing up there?
We're doing good.
Oh, good. I know everybody's probably really focused and afraid of dropping stitches or anything. The good news is it's okay. If that happens, it happens. We're just doing a few stitches here. Take it one step at a time. I remember when I first learned to knit, it was a little bit tricky. Allie, do you remember the first time you had some stitches on the needle?
I do. I had somebody in person to help me. So thankfully
That
they
is
were
good.
able to correct my slip, my any of my mistakes for me.
Right, right. It's one of those things. It is helpful if you have somebody around you that knows how to knit, or if you're able to find yourself a good YouTube instructor that you like that you can follow along with. Maybe some beginner videos. That's always super helpful. I know that I have a lot of beginner videos and entire beginner lessons for people. That is helpful. One thing I want you to see right here is I am still knitting the exact same way I was showing you, but I'm actually holding the yarn in my other hand. But the whole motion and everything is exactly the same. And the reason I want to make sure you see this is in case you do come across a YouTube video, you can be like, oh my gosh, I know what they're doing. They're still knitting. They're just holding the yarn in the opposite hand. So watch this. I'm going in the front door. I'm still going around the long way and up over top of my needle. I'm still coming out the window and I'm still jumping off the porch. In the front door, around the corner, through the window, off the porch. It's the exact same motion as if my yarn, oops, was in my other hand. In the front door, around the corner, out the window, off the porch. In the front door, around the corner, out the window, off the porch. Pretty great. So I'm curious, show of hands, how many of you are excited to make some of these for either yourself, maybe some grandkids, maybe your friends? Just wondering how many of you are excited to grab some of that yarn that is available out there at Michael's and some needles and get started with this. Granddaughter, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. I know my kids would have loved these. Now they're so old, they're no longer eating ice pops. They're eating like pints of ice cream. So I would need like a pint holder if I wanted to help their little cold hands. All right. So I'm just going to keep going here because I want to make sure you know how to do this. As you are working on this, you keep working until this measures about 3.5 inches. So obviously mine is not going to get to 3.5 inches in this 30-minute segment. But once you get it to 3.5 inches, what you will do is called bind off. So I need to get a couple of rows here real quick, guys. So I'm going to go very fast and knit very fast so that I can get some rows here to show you what to do. So I know you're not going to learn very much when I'm doing this, but I want you to have some rows to see. So give me just a second. And as I'm still just knitting, just like I showed you, I'm just going faster and I'm holding the yarn in my other hand. But everything else is going to be the same. Like I said, in case you just jumped in, I want to make sure that I have some fabric here to show you how to sew yours together. And it's too hard to do it when I don't have very much fabric. So I want to get some rows going. While I'm doing this, Allie, I know that Yarn Inspirations has a lot of really wonderful kid-friendly, beginner-friendly patterns available on the website. Do you have anything that you can kind of direct people to as far as how to find those wonderful patterns?
I definitely can drop a link in here.
All right, that would be good. I know that sometimes as beginners, we get a little bit overwhelmed looking out there at all the patterns, trying to decide what's best for us. But anything that you find that is all knitting, you guys, or all something that's called garter stitch, that's what you're creating here. you'd be able to do that. And if you like what you're doing here with this garter stitch, you don't have to stop at 3.5 inches and make a cozy. If you wanted to just keep going and make yourself a cowl, you could do that. Or you could continue and make yourself a scarf. There's lots of different things you could do. You don't have to stop right away. So the biggest thing with knitting is as we're going through all of these stitches, as they're resting on our needle, they are still live stitches or active stitches, meaning if one fell off the needle, it would run all the way through my fabric like a run in a pantyhose. And so that's not something you want to happen once you've put all this work into actually knitting. So you have to do something called binding off. And it's essentially you're locking the stitches in place by having one stitch leapfrog up and over another stitch. So that way the stitches are locked in place and won't fall anywhere. Conveniently with crochet, we bind off or lock the stitches in place after we create each stitch. So we don't have to do a bind off row in crochet, but that is where crochet and knitting are different. You have to do a bind off row in knitting if you're not going to thread a string through the whole thing and create like a circle or something. So I'm going to do one more row here and then I'm going to do a bind off row. So that way you can see how to do that. And then I will show you how to whip stitch these together, which is as easy as it sounds. All right. So I'm going to say that's a little bit of fabric there. We can get enough with that. All right. So once you reach your 3.5 inches of fabric, what you're going to do is bind off. So we're essentially going to knit 2 stitches and then we're going to have the back stitch jump up and over the front stitch like a leapfrog. So let me grab my yarn here. So we knit 2 stitches just like regular. And the whole point there is we want to get 2 stitches onto our right hand needle. So there's 1 and there's 2. Now I have 2 stitches on my right hand needle. So I use my left hand needle. I'm going to go into the front of this stitch right there. So it's the first one I did. And I'm going to pick it up and leapfrog it up and over that front one. Okay, so now it's up and over it. Take my left needle out. So you can see the stitch now, it's like it's around the throat of the stitch on my needle. So now I have 1 stitch over here on my right hand needle. I need to get to 2. So I go ahead and knit another stitch, grab the back stitch, jump up and over that front stitch and off. I have to knit another one because I always want to get to 2 stitches. Back stitch, jump up and over that front stitch and off. You do this all the way down the row. You always knit 1 more stitch, take the back stitch, have it jump up and over that front stitch, and then knit 1 more, back stitch, jump up and over that front stitch, knit 1 more, back, jump up and over the front. You see how important that knitted cast on is? Like we've been using those motions through this entire class so far. So that knitted cast on is really helpful because the minute you can get sort of comfortable with it, you just transition with it just ever so slightly to actually create knit stitches or bind off stitches. And it's all done with that same movement of in the front door, around the corner, out the window, and now we're having leapfrog. Off the porch, leapfrog over. You do this all the way down. We're going to get down to where we have 1 stitch left on our right hand needle. So this is the last stitch on my left hand needle. A leapfrog up and over. And this is where I will take my scissors. Pro tip, add a pom-pom to your scissors. You'll never lose them. You want to make sure you cut this tail a little bit long because we're going to use this tail to weave or not weave, but to seam our piece together. So I'm just going to cut it nice and long here. Now, the loop that's on my needle, I'm going to extend it up and make it so that it comes all the way out. See, there's the tail. It's coming all the way out, and pull it snug. Okay, so now I have all these stitches bound off. What you want to do is you're going to take your freezer pop cozy. You're going to fold it together lengthwise. Okay, so you fold it like a hot dog, not a hamburger. I don't know if you guys remember that in school. Hot dog, not a hamburger. And we're going to take this long tail and take our tapestry needle. This is the one I told you about, a bent tip tapestry needle. And we're going to thread this yarn through our tapestry needle. So you take the yarn, your tail, pinch it around the eye of your needle, just pinch it real snug, pull your needle out, and then you can just shimmy that eye of the needle right through the yarn, or the yarn through the eye of the needle. Give that a little bit of a tug. Come down here, match up the cast on edge to your bind off edge, and we're literally just going to whip stitch them together. So I'm just kind of going through both edges of the fabric. I'm going to pull it through. Okay, and then you come over here and you do it again. You do it all the way up. And when you're done, you're going to have a nice little seam that you could weave in your tail into, and then your pop cozy, your frozen pop cozy is all done. As you're doing this, make sure that you're keeping these edges lined up. You don't want to accidentally get one side longer than the other. But this is pretty much how it's done. It's really easy. It's called whip stitching. You're just whipping them together. Allie, how are we doing?
We're doing good.
All right. As I'm doing this, I can't see the questions, so I wasn't sure if we had any. But apparently everybody's just mesmerized by my wonderful whip stitching skills. When you get up to the end here, make sure you get all the way to the end. I like to come back on it just a little bit. Not too much, just a little. And then what I like to do is, so you have sort of this diagonal thread going across here from where you were whip stitching. I just take my needle and I thread it through the diagonal a little and thread down. Give that a pull. Okay, so now that feels pretty good. If I want to make this uber secure, I would go up a little ways too. I'm not really super worried about it, so I'm just going to go up a little bit. And then at that point, you can snip this really nice and close. And then take the extra out of your needle, grab your other tail that you started with, and do the same thing as far as threading. But then down here, if you have a little gap, you can close it up. And then do the same thing, just thread it up the diagonal. You can snip this. I have a tickle in my throat. I'm gonna have to take a drink of water real quick. Once that's all done, excuse me, it looks like this. You can, obviously yours will be a little bit bigger. You can turn it the other way so that the whip stitch is hidden. It's a little bit harder here with this little tiny piece, but now you have it. Little tiny cozy. So that could be your first knit piece. And obviously you can see, I mean, it looks a little wonky even on mine. They just get stretched out a little bit, and that's totally fine. So like I said, whether it's perfect or not, nobody's ever really going to know. It's just going to be perfectly fine. Okay. All right. So that's the knit one. Let's go ahead and let's play around with crochet. Now crochet, if you want to go to my face real quick. Sorry, my eyes are watering because I was coughing. Okay, so the crochet one, you guys, crochet is a little bit trickier in that we have to find the chains that we're going to be working into, and then we're going to bind off each stitch as we create them. So whereas in knitting, we kept all those stitches live on our needle, when we crochet with a single crochet, we are finishing off each stitch along the way. That's why your your stitches don't like run like your knitting stitches. Okay, so I'm going to grab a crochet hook, and I'm going to use green yarn for this one, and we're going to dive in. All right, get some more water here real quick. Okay, so I have some green yarn. I'm going to see if I can pull the right end here. Okay, we're going to make a slip knot just like we did for knitting. So I'm going to take the tail of the yarn, put it in the palm of my hand. I'm going to hold it with my thumb. Okay, take my working yarn, wrap it around my forefinger and my middle finger. And when I come back up, I cross over. Rotate my hand over, go underneath that front loop, grab the back loop, pull them off of my fingers, give that a little tug, and I have a slip knot. Okay, just a reminder, this is getting recorded, so you can go back and watch this anytime. We're going to take this slip knot and place it onto our hook, and then separate your tail and the working yarn, and you have a slip knot on your hook. Now, I will be crocheting right-handed. There are right-handed and left-handed crocheters, but I am going to instruct you on how to do right-handed, just so everybody knows that if you are a left-handed crocheter, you can find left-handed instructions out there if you choose. Okay, when we are crocheting, this loop that is on our hook never counts as a stitch. So that is different than in knitting. Remember, in knitting, we counted our slip knot as a stitch. In crochet, we do not. What we want to do now is we're going to take our yarn, and even though I'm right-handed, that means that I'm going to hold the hook with my right hand, but I'm going to hold the yarn with my left hand. And what I like to do is take my hook, and I'm going to hold it like this so you guys can see. I'm going to take my hook, and I'm going to go over towards the left and go underneath and grab that yarn. And because this hook here is sort of like a teardrop if it's on its side, actually it's not. So you have the hook, but your loop is like a teardrop if it's on its side. So when I pull my hook through the loop on my hook, I rotate it so that way the hook portion goes like to the bottom of that teardrop, and it can easily pop through. I'm going to show you again. I yarn over, so I go from left, go underneath, and then as I pull this loop through the loop on my hook, I rotate my hook down so it pulls through. Okay, notice I'm holding the knot portion down here to help you out with that. Around, and then pull through. Around, and pull through. You want to make sure that these chains right here are not getting too loose, okay? You want to make sure they are still nice and loose. I'm sorry, you want to make sure they're not getting too tight. You want to make sure they're nice and loose. After you've created about 4 chains, the best thing to do is to move so I've been holding the knot down here like so. I like to move up my thumb and rest my thumb on the tops of these chains, so where the V is. I'll rest my thumb up there, and then I will create some more chains. And we're supposed to create 14 chains. All right, you guys? So I'm just going to create a few chains here, and then we're going to jump in. So let's pretend we have 14 chains. What we want to do is we're going to do what's called a single crochet in the second chain from hook. So we will not count this loop on our hook. We will work the single crochet into the second chain from hook. So not the first, but the second. So what you need to do is think of this chain. I like to hold it in this manner. Think of this as a line that we're going to start working into. So I'm going to take my hook, I'm going to come over here to the second chain. And I don't care if you go into what would be called the back loop, or if you go through right, you pierce the center of that V, so that way you have the back loop and what I call the butt of the stitch on your hook. Like, that's my preferred method. Either way works. Once you've pierced that stitch, so we've put our hook through it, you will yarn over. So this time we are doing it opposite from the knitting. When knitting, we went this way, right? With crochet, we go over top. So it really is a yarn over top of the hook. And then pull that loop through. You have 2 loops on your hook. Now we're going to yarn over again. So we go over top of our hook and pull that yarn over through the 2 loops on our hook. That's one. That's one single crochet. You go to the next chain over. So if you kind of stretch this out, you can be like, okay, I can see I worked into that one. Let's find this one. So we're going to go into that. We're going to go into right, pierce the center of that V, yarn over, pull up a loop. So I have 2 loops on my hook, yarn over, draw through both of those loops. You guys see? So now I go to the next chain. So I pierce it right there with my hook, yarn over my hook, pull that loop up. So I have 2 loops on my hook, yarn over my hook, and pull it through the 2 loops on my hook. So I go in, around, and out, yarn over, draw through 2. In, around, out, yarn over, draw through 2. In, now in the very last one, it looks tricky. Make sure you go all the way in it, come around and out, yarn over and draw through 2. Okay. Now I will let you know, working into these chain stitches is probably one of the most difficult things to do in crochet. So this very first row is literally the hardest row. So I'm going to do it one more time. All right, you guys. So I'm going to undo this and do this one more time. Here's the slip knot. I have the working yarn in the palm of my hand. I'm sorry, I have the tail in the palm of my hand. Working yarn, wrap it around my forefinger and my middle finger. And when I come back up, I cross over. Rotate my hand over. You can use your hook if you want. You can go underneath the front loop, grab that back loop and pull it off. Take your fingers out and you have a slip knot. Now we're going to chain. You can chain 14. So I grasp the knot. I go around the chain just like this. So you're still yarning over. You guys see that? It's like you're yarning over the hook, yarning over the hook, and bring that through. There's 1, 2, 3. And then I move the pad of my finger up. 4, 5, 6. Pad of my finger up. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay. Never count the loop on your hook. We're going to single crochet in the second chain from hook. If your chains were done correctly, they look like V's. So you're going to count the second V. We're going to take our hook and go right into that V. I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop. Okay, notice I grasped the chain underneath those 2 loops. I kind of hold it steady. Yarn over and then pull through those 2 loops. If you have a stitch marker handy, these are super great and perfect for you to use for crochet because they will help you keep your place as you're working down your rows. You can take your slip marker, your stitch marker at this point, and in that V, you see how that looks like a V behind the loop on my hook? Take your stitch marker and put it right into that V. And what you are marking there is the very first stitch of this row, which means it'll be the last stitch of the next row. And as you complete each row, you'll move up that stitch marker. You'll have one at either end, and it will help you maintain all of your stitches, okay? Because you'll have 13 single crochets. Now that we've done that first single crochet, we go to the next chain and we do another one. So I go into it, yarn over, pull up a loop. I grasp the bottom of those 2 loops to keep them steady, yarn over, draw through 2. Go to the next chain and repeat. Pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. Now I'm gonna do this all the way down this row. Once I get to the end of the row, what I'm gonna do is work what's called a chain 1, which is just like what we did with our foundation chain. We're gonna just create one on the side of our work, and we're going to turn our work, and then we will work single crochets on top of these single crochets we're creating. So the next row will actually be a lot easier than this first row. So as you're feeling frustrated and your fingers are all over the place and your yarn is like coiling up on itself and you're like, I just don't know how this works, trust me, it gets easier with time. The first row is always the most difficult. Okay, it's just going to take practice. When you get to the end, make sure you get that last stitch. If you want to take a second and count your stitches, one thing you could do is come down here where you marked that stitch. You see where you have that V? Count all of your V's down the row. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That's the V behind the loop on my hook. You chain 1. So we just do a basic chain, just like we did at the beginning. We yarn over our hook and pull through. That's a chain 1. And we turn. So if we've been imagining our work as working straight across, just like this, you literally turn it just like so, and you work back on top of the stitches you just created. We work back towards this stitch marker. What we want to do is after we create our first stitch over here, we will place a marker over here. So we'll have a marker at both ends. All right, you ready? So I've turned my work, and you can see that big hole right there, right? It's the hole. What that hole is essentially, it's the bottom part of the V that we counted. That's the V that we were counting when we were counting our stitches. See, it's right there. What I want you to do is I want you to go underneath that V. See, you're going right through it. So you're going underneath the V, yarn over your hook, pull that yarn over back through that V and up, grasp the bottom, yarn over, pull through 2. You go to the next V, so you can look at the top, find the V, put your hook underneath it. See that? Yarn over, pull that yarn over underneath that V and up. So you have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, draw through 2. Go to the next V, you can find it, put your hook underneath, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. Now I didn't put my stitch marker down here. I forgot to do that. So I want to do that real quick. And if you forgot to do it, that's okay. All you need to do is count back your V's. So there's 1 V, there's 2 V, here's 3 V. So that one right there, that was our first stitch of the row. So I could place my marker in there, and I know now that when I come back on my 3rd row, that's the last stitch I want to go to. Now I'm going to keep working these single crochets into each of the stitches all the way down my row until I get to my marker. And my marker lets me know that that's the last stitch of my row. So my work will not get sideways on me. So I'm going to get all the way down here. I'm going to show you how you can use that marker and how it works. And then I'm going to create some fabric here so that way we can once again seam this up also. So I'll be going a little bit quicker, but I come all the way down. And this is usually where people get a little bit iffy. They're like, am I the last stitch or not? Because you marked it, you know that that stitch there that you marked is the last stitch. So you go in underneath the V, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2, chain 1, turn your work, and we're going to create our first stitch right here. That's underneath that V. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2, undo this marker, move it up so that it's behind the loop on your hook for the one you just completed. And now you're ready to keep going. So you just are working single crochets. Sorry, I have like Velcro attached to my yarn here. You're creating these single crochets all the way down the row. So on this one, when I get to the end, I'll be putting my last stitch into the stitch that's marked with my greenish blue marker. I know I'm going a little bit fast here, but it's because I want to make sure I get some stitches on here for you to see how to whip stitch the crochet together. Chain 1, turn, put my first stitch right there, move my marker up, make sure you put it into the V behind the loop on your hook. See that? Okay. And then keep going. These stitch markers, you guys, they are not mandatory. You absolutely do not have to use them, but I will tell you, even as a professional crocheter, I use stitch markers all the time. They just make things so much easier as far as identifying what is the first and last stitch of your row. So that way you can easily make sure all of your edges are nice and clean and crisp. Okay. And we know that that chain 1 does not count as a stitch, and that's why we are placing that first stitch in that very first V. Chain 1, turn, put our stitch right there, move up our marker, and keep going. All right, so I'm gonna just get some fabric going here. Allie, how are we doing?
We're doing good. There was a question here on if they could use cotton for these little freeze pop cozies.
Oh, totally. Yeah, you totally could. Some good lily sugar and cream would be pretty. Can pretty much use anything that I could think of. I mean, if you wanted to make silk ones, you could, but I don't know why you would, but you could. Chain 1 and turn. I will let you guys know that you can chain 1 and turn or turn and chain 1. It doesn't matter. It's totally whatever your preference is. Go ahead. No, I'm going a little bit faster here, but I want to get some fabric here so I can whip this together for you guys. I'm going to remove that marker. And then I'm going to not use markers for the last couple rows here. So if you are finding that you are increasing or decreasing your stitches, you definitely want to make sure that you didn't skip over a chain when you first did your initial first row. And then as you're working each of the rows, you want to make sure that you are working each of those stitches, that you don't accidentally miss one. And then of course, finally, as far as missing one, it's really common people will miss one at the beginning or the end of the row. So you do want to make sure you're keeping track. And as beginner crocheters, it's really common to lose those stitches or to gain extra stitches. So don't think that you are a terrible crocheter for any reason, if that's the case, because it is so very common. That's why even professionals still use stitch markers to make sure that their stitch count is on par or on the mark. So I want to make sure you guys all know that. And again, we're doing what's called a single crochet in American crochet terms. This is actually called a, I think this is called a double crochet in UK terminology. I always get that stuff confused, but I want to make sure you guys know what we're creating here. And I'm going to do one more row. The pattern does indicate you're supposed to work this for a set number of rows. It says through row 12, but I'm just going to tell you, just go until it's about 3.5 inches. That works really well. It's much easier than counting your rows. I'm just going to let you know that right now. Just make it until it's about 3.5 inches. Once it's done on this final row, when you get done with that last stitch there, we don't have to bind off stitches, right? Because we've been binding them off essentially the whole way. Once again, you want to make sure you cut your tail, leaving a nice long tail, so that way we can use it to seam. Just like in knitting, this last loop, we can just extend it up and get rid of it. But for crochet, I like to just, so you see I made the loop here. I'm going to grab the tail and just pull it through just to give myself a little secure knot there. I like that. And just like in knitting, you'll fold this over. You're going to take your tail and your tapestry needle, and you can sew this together. So you'll go through both ends. I'm going to start over here at this side this time and come through. And this is it. This is how you would do it. And you can use any color yarn you wish. It doesn't have to be a solid. It can absolutely be a variegated. It could be one of the pooling yarn variegated. It could be the blocking yarn. It could be anything you want. It's just a fun little piece. And you know what? If you happen to drop a stitch here or there, nobody's ever really going to tell once this is on your little freezer pop. So don't be a perfectionist. Give yourself a little wiggle room here, and shoot, if you use a green one like this, when you're all done, you can stuff it with, this is really off topic, you could stuff it with stuffing, seam the tops together, and you have yourself a pickle ornament for your tree. So if you want to do something fun like that, put some googly eyes on it and you could be like, look what I made for Christmas. Because you totally could, like, this would be super easy to do. Seriously, once you whip it together, just up here at the top, you could do like a running stitch. Oh, why not? Let's just do this. You could do a running stitch and then close it up, fill it with some fiber fill sort of stuff. Put some googly eyes on it, and you have yourself a fun little pickle for your Christmas tree if you want, if you don't want to make these pops. So I did a running stitch, so I'm going to pull it. So now it's closed. I just pop this right down, tuck it in, right? I know, totally off topic, y'all, but you know what I mean. So here we are. All I do is fill it with fiber fill, put a little eyes on it, pinch up that end, and I have myself a pickle if you want. I don't know. This is what you get. But you don't have to do that. You can leave that open if you want. Or a cactus. Yes, you could absolutely make a succulent. Have yourself a little succulent farm. Something fun. And if you're a knitter, don't feel like you're left out. You could absolutely sew that top over there and have yourself a little pickle there also. Whatever floats your boat, y'all. All right. Bet you didn't expect that one. So there you have it. Freezer pop cozies, whether you want to knit or crochet, these are a great introduction to each of the crafts. Once again, be patient with yourself. No matter which skill you're trying, it does take some muscle memory. You got to build up that neural pathway to make sure that everything works out. And everything takes practice, right? Everybody tells you that your whole life, but this really does. It just takes some practice and you can have something fun. If you do make these fun little cozies, share with us on social media. Use hashtag MarleyBird or hashtag Yarnspirations or hashtag Make It with Michaels. That's it for me. You guys can catch me over on YouTube whenever you want, or on Instagram, I'm at @VMarleyBird. All right, Allie, back to you.
Perfect. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us on another Michael's Community Classroom, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye, everyone.